Hey guys, it's Heather the Boss here, and I am back with a fabulous little art tip for you guys today. And this is a very juicy little topic today that I can't wait to get into. One of the things that I hear a lot of people say who are just starting out with charcoal is that it smears and smudges all over the place. Now this is a multifaceted issue. There could be a lot of different things that you're referring to when you're saying that your charcoal ends up smearing and getting all crazy all over the paper. If I don't end up answering your question fully, you could just leave me a comment down below, and I'm planning on probably making a second follow-up video to this if I have a lot more questions, and I will answer them for you guys again the best that I can. There's something that I really want you guys to think about before I even start talking about the 5 tips that I have for you guys. If you're learning how to draw with pencil and you get comfortable with it and then you move to charcoal, you might feel like you're being thrown for a loop and that charcoal is just this evil, terrible, messy thing. When you're working with charcoal, it's a completely different medium. And I feel that a lot of people, including myself, when I first started using charcoal, I expected it to behave similarly to a pencil, and that is just not how it works. Let me give you guys a funny little example. So if I were to compare charcoal and pencil to specific time periods, pencil would have to be the 50s. It's going to do what you expect, and it's pretty predictable, right? It wants to stay in one place and behave itself. It's a good little pencil. And what do we have over here? Mr. Charcoal. Reminds me a lot of the 60s. It wants to experiment and explore and just spread love all over your paper. What I'm trying to get at here is that you would not compare the 60s and the 50s as if they were the same thing. They're completely different things, okay? Charcoal likes to spread. You can smear it around, and you can actually use this to your advantage a lot when you're working with charcoal. So keep an open mind. There's some things that you can do with charcoal so brilliantly that you can't accomplish with pencil in the same way.
Here's an example of what I mean. You can see here that I'm taking advantage of the Vine Charcoal's ability to smudge all over the place by creating an evenly blended base. If I were doing this with pencil, for one, it would not be this simple and it would take me a lot longer.
The first tip that I have for you guys is going to be talking about what to do when your drawing transfers onto another piece of paper, or hopefully not onto another piece of artwork, because that is just terrible. I'm just going to be honest with you guys. Charcoal is always going to transfer. That's just the way it works. Personally, I don't like using fixative because it can actually change the surface of your drawing and make your darker areas more of a mid-tone gray, so I don't like doing this. I always like to use a little piece of newsprint on top of my charcoal drawings. As you can see here, I have my little bat over here. I have just this piece of paper on top of it at all times. Just always have a piece of newsprint or some other scratch piece of paper on top of it. You could also use wax paper, that works well too. My second tip is for some of you guys who have been saying that their charcoal drawings just end up looking smudged in general. They don't have a lot of definition to it. And I'll give you an example right here. Where are you, Oprah? My poor unfinished Oprah drawing. I will finish it someday. So, as you can see, it's very... Oh, you can't see, actually. As you guys can see, it doesn't have a lot of definition. You don't have those sharp edges. I'm using the Oprah drawing as an example because when I'm first starting out with my charcoal drawings, they do look smudged, and that's completely fine. It actually helps you cover a lot of ground when you are starting out with your drawing. Just take that charcoal and smudge it where you want it to be to create a nice mid-tone gray. But then I will come back in, and not with this guy, but with my charcoal pencil and also a pencil eraser. How are you going to get extremely tiny details if you're using this, or even the Vine Charcoal? It's just not going to happen. You get that fine detail work in if you're using a fine tipped point little thing like this. You're not going to get it with the block. Now moving on to my next tip, if you're having a problem where your charcoal is smudging while you're working with it, this is going to sound like a very basic tip, but you always have to have something underneath your hand to protect your little wrist and all of this area from getting charcoal on it, because it will. Now I know that in the tutorials that I show you guys how to draw stuff with charcoal, you don't see that little piece of paper in between my hand. And the reason why is because it really is going to distract from my video. It's not that I don't use that little scratch piece of paper. Another really important thing to keep in mind when you're working with charcoal is the paper that you are using. The paper can really make or break your charcoal drawings because it matters if it has a tooth to it or not. Do you guys know what I mean when I'm talking about the tooth of the paper? It's that tiny little groove. This is going to be the worst example known to mankind, but I'm going to do it anyway. So if you have this paper and it's smooth, think of this as the charcoal particle. It's just going to roll right off, right? It's going to be sad. But if I have a paper that has a groove to it, like this little tooth kind of thing, it's going to boop, fall in that little paper socket, if you will. And that's what you want to do. You want to be able to have paper that catches your charcoal. Now, they actually have paper that they sell at art stores that's specifically meant for charcoal, and it has a lot of grooves in it. I personally don't like using this paper. If you're doing more figurative drawing kind of work, I know this isn't that great of a picture, but you feel me? If you're working a lot looser, I would actually recommend getting that paper that's meant for charcoal. It's going to hold it on your paper a lot better. The paper that I find works really well for the techniques that I use would be some mixed media paper. I also really like this paper right here. You guys can see it. I love this drawing pad. I used it for school and I still use it today. Of course, I had to save my best tip for last, or at least in my opinion, I think it's the best tip. Now, when I'm working with charcoal, I'm adding layer upon layer, and I'm blending and erasing and adding more charcoal. If you watched my tutorials before, you see it's a very repetitive process, and if you haven't seen my tutorials, I will link them down for you guys so you can see what I'm talking about. I'm blending it into the paper so it's sticking. Then I go back and I erase, and I also use more charcoal, and because of that, it just stays better. And I really would like you guys to think about that when you're working with charcoal and you're trying to get something that is more detailed. Think about it as if you're layering it, and while you're doing that, you're staining the paper as you go. And as you can imagine, the more layers that you're adding, the harder it's going to be for you to erase it. But at the same time, the more likely it's just going to stay on the paper and not just fall off. Please keep in mind that this is just the way that I like to use charcoal personally, but I think it could help some of you guys out there. Those are my tips for you guys. I really hope that they helped you out some and you are able to take some of the things that I've said and apply it to the work that you are doing. My charcoal and I are going to have a good old hippie time over here. See you guys later.